Oh,
okay.
Oh, shit.
All right.
Oh, shit. My Hero Academia basically took the whole thing of, society, it's got some problems to, like, the nth degree.
So,
like, really quickly.
100,000.
That's a city.
That's a very big number.
Yeah. That is, to put it in perspective here, the city that we live in right now, I believe that's like 50% more than the people that live in the entire city. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Based on that. That's a population.
Now,
that's not
the
an
thing
army.
is,
That's
now, army is potentially a very general term.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Who knows what kind of training this army has undergone, right? And quirks are very different for different people and things like that.
I think, yeah.
But if each of them is truly deserving to be called a soldier in this world of superheroes, right? Where they've like been fully trained, they're not just like uprising kind of style.
I don't think it really matters whether or not they really have that training. It's just the idea of if you have an incident where there's someone that steals from someone else, but it's not that. It's just that all the citizens in this entire town walk out into the streets and start basically like protesting openly in that regard there. You can't just beat them up or take them in. You have to talk to them. You have to find out what want. You have to figure out how to handle that kind of a situation.
That would be lovely if that was how those were handled. But but that is the best case
scenario.
Kitty Gloves scenario.
Yes, of course.
Hawk said army.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what they probably call themselves, though.
Sure.
The meta liberation
army. hence why it's important of how much these people can actually be taken as true soldiers, because that can go anywhere from oh yeah, I'm a random person who wants some sort of societal change, and will protest or something like that, to Dabi or Shigaraki or Toga.
Right. And my point is that it's definitely impossible for them to have actually trained 100,000 of them. That's just theoretically not possible, I would say, in terms of getting like soldier level training. That's why I wouldn't call them soldiers, because the army thing is to bring power to the idea of the 100,000. If you call them the Meta Liberation Front, basically, then you don't get this idea that they're necessarily going to be aggressive. You put the focus on liberation.
Right.
By saying army.
Yeah, this is very much the emphasis is on army.
Yes, exactly. Right. All that is the descriptors of that.
Oh, boy.
And there's no way they actually are soldiers in the literal term. That's why I'm saying it doesn't really matter how much training they got. Enough of them will have training.
Exactly.
That it is effectively an army.
Yep.
So that's the issue. Okay, there's some intrigue shenanigans going on here. And Hawks is so in the thick of it that we just changed the entire almost genre of the plot here for a little bit, and I'm here for it.
Me too. Yeah. This is kind of what I've been. Okay, no. This specifically is not what I've been hoping would happen, because I would not have been able to see this kind of thing like coming, right?
Well, we have been getting hints. We've
been getting hints of it.
A lot of hints, yeah.
And we have known for a while that we need to reach that point where the students suddenly are forced to stop being kids, right? Where they need to join the world of adults, whether they're ready or not, right? Yeah. Because the show gets into the idea of what does it mean to be a hero, right? Yep. And that the concept and what people hold up as being a hero kind of has lost its has become tarnished over time, right? And that was Stain's whole thing, and it was a good thing to point out.
Yeah, he was the tip of the iceberg for this style of of movement. Yeah.
And within our characters within the story, we're following them because they are going to be the heroes among heroes. Right.
Yeah. The new generation, yeah.
Exactly. The ones who remind this hero society what it means to be a hero. Yep. In order for that to happen, they have to do things truly heroic. Going through a hero course, that's cool, that's a great start, but there's a lot of people that do that, right? How can we turn it up a notch, right? Well, it's because, they won't get to finish their hero course, I'm guessing. But, you know what? Ready or not, they're going to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, this is the part that gets weird, though, is that if you have heroes within hero kind of society that are already just going by the law of large numbers here, there's going to be heroes that are within this whole thing because of Hawks's kind of movements and the way he's acting and stuff that are antagonistic towards our protagonists and stuff. And Hawks's actions just show how messy this can get.
Yep.
Is that he's probably in some ways the one we most can trust, weirdly enough, because he's so in the thick of the conflict and there's a personal element to it and of his adoration for Endeavor, like specifically.
Yeah.
We now know that at the very least he will do everything it takes to stop this from going into all-out chaos.
Right.
Now, the problem is that he's one person with maybe a very strong busted quirk, but we've already seen, because of the Nomu fight, where his limits are not just in his capabilities within being a hero, but also just physically in terms of fighting. So, I think he's going to go the distance in terms of this conflict, but I could also see him bearing so much of the burden of this conflict that he dies trying to stop it.
Absolutely.
Like, I very much felt death flags for him.
Well,
like, throughout this episode.
So we got something in either the OP or the ED, I can't remember. But
it was the ED, the glass part.
No, not that. Not that.
Oh, which part?
We got a bit where it showed Bakugo, Deku, and Todoroki.
Oh yeah, that was the OP. Yeah.
No. And but the thing is that they were like leaping through the air, and there was a flaming bird in front of them.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Now, I'm a big fan of the mythical creature that is the Phoenix, right? The fact that Hawks is a big fan of Endeavor, I don't know. Thematically, that seems like they could go in a direction similar to that, and the OP seems to kind of be confirming that.
This seems like they're following after the Phoenix's flames.
Yes.
They're basically following in Endeavor's footsteps. Yeah.
Right, and that's what I could see it being, is that basically Hawks and Endeavor are kind of the ones truly leading Hero Society right now, even though Hawks is doing it from the background, you know? Like people
he's pushing Endeavor.
Right, he's pushing Endeavor, and he's getting the word out
wings.
about yes, exactly. And getting the word out about this army of 100,000 that's just out there, all under the guise of spreading propaganda, right?
Yeah.
But that is the kind of thing where eventually that will have to be insufficient. They will have to rely on the new generation in the same way that the work studies became a thing that was required, right?
Yeah, but think about this from like a long-term perspective. Society never really wins during like a war.
Nope.
It's
just hopefully less loss.
Yeah, that's basically
the win.
It's basically meaning that someone or some people at the top decided that peace was never an option, basically.
Or at least it isn't now.
Well, but that's the point. It ultimately wasn't from their perspective because they're running the risk, basically, of losing a war over not having a war at all.
Yeah.
Which is meaning that they would rather have the after effects and the fallout and all the chaos that comes with that than potentially failing in like negotiations or communications, diplomacy, all these other kinds of things that you can choose before you go to war. And yet we're in we're in a situation where we're not fighting necessarily against another nation. We're not fighting against necessarily another group of people that are like, these are going to be people that are right next to you,
right?
That are your neighbors, your family and friends,
right? The spy in Class 1A, that's an example.
Yeah,
right.
It's that nervous suspicion that who amongst us is
right. Well, and anytime you get into the whole idea of like a civil war or something like that, the scariest thing is that what happens when it's like, oh, okay, now you're going up to fight your cousin.
Yeah,
and it's like
saying family and friends. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or what happens when you basically look at the two sides of the conflict and you don't agree with either of them? You're not represented by either of them. That's actually...
War's still going to happen.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. Usually, I would say, when people look at a war in general, most of the people in the innocence there join up with the side that they probably just think is going to win. Not actually the one they necessarily agree with.
Or the one that'll just disrupt their life the least.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, people are like water. They follow the path of least resistance for the most part. And the thing is then that makes, in a weird way, the Meta Liberation Army potentially the more noble of
Well-
the groups there, depending on their actions, because they haven't done anything yet.
Sure, at the very least, it's in that, and that's why villains
As
a
far as
lot of
we
the
know.
times in stories are, if they're done well, if they're given actual motivations, are
Can
at
be
the
quite
very
compelling.
can be compelling even if you don't agree with what they're doing, because they're at the very least actively trying to change the status quo because they see something as being wrong, right?
And
And the heroes oftentimes are reactionary, and so they can feel, well, less heroic in some ways.
true, because they're being forced into situations where they can't really be
Right.
that heroic.
They're not actually making decisions so much as they're just like
trying to return balance, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
And-
is usually imbalanced
Yep.
already.
And one of the best ways that you can make conflict is to make it so that on both sides you have people that the audience agrees with and sympathizes with, but because of the situation in the world, they can't coexist.
Yeah.
Or they've decided that they can't coexist, and then they have to fight, right?
Yeah.
And that's a recipe for heartbreak, right?
Yeah, I really like, though, how they're bringing up the idea, though, that the Meta Liberation Army is not necessarily the League of Villains' thing. There's a connotation that the League of Villains is
Latched
its
onto this
own-
idea that was already there.
Well, no, it's this own literal group of people.
Yes.
It's not 100,000 strong. The Meta Liberation Army is basically like it's like the viral stain video. It's a
Yeah,
thing that they
exactly.
can put out there to the front, and then people
Yep.
join in on it.
Right.
And then maybe the League of Villains is in cahoots with some people connected to it.
Enemy
But
of my enemy. Kinda.
Right, but at the very least, I love it because there's so much potential then within a new group with a new ideology that isn't necessarily like Stain's ideology. One that could be, influenced by it,
Sure.
but one that is actually, as far as, connecting to the League of Villains go, like actually even antithetical to most of what
Yeah.
the League of Villains is.
Right,
Like
but-
that would be really cool.
And they'll probably hash that out once Hero Society has been crushed. you
Right.
know?
One of the things that needs to happen in terms of the conflict for the story in general is the heroes need to not necessarily lose like a battle or something like that, but they need to have what you were talking about, the kids brought into the world of adults in a way that doesn't end the school necessarily, but ends preconceived notions of how Hero Society has to look once they're fully in the world
Like,
of adults,
giving
them more agency, if you will.
Yeah.
Hero agency,
Like-
as characters.
In the OP, like that was straight up some post-apocalyptic kind of scenery.
It did look like that,
Like
yeah.
that's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, okay, all of a sudden we're in a young adult novel or something like that. That's like, all right, Hero Society has been torn down, and now it's they have to have rugged good looks as they go about in this desolate wasteland.
Hey, I am so in for the things have fallen to shit because in a weird way,
Yeah.
one of my favorite like quiet things about MHA is how much just reliance on items and things there is. So I can just totally see like everyone being like we have to,
Getting
like,
together the
go
scrappy
together,
gear and,
yeah, the
like-
scrapping up, pulling up our gear and everything. Like my
Yeah.
stuff broke.
Yeah.
I have to figure out how to hold back my cord a little bit more.
yeah.
This isn't worth it in the long run.
Medicine lady or whatever her name is, she's not here right now, so we just keep taking damage, Die Hard style, and eventually, by the end of the season, we have some crazy final battle.
and then they all have that moment where they're like, "Is this even our fight?
I wanna-
is this even? Should we even be doing this?
I want to see
Is
them.
it worth all this?
Oh sure, yeah. And well, certainly, okay. Maybe we're not fighting for Hero Society anymore. Maybe
No.
we're fighting for whatever's next, right? Mm-hmm. And what does that even mean?
What does that even mean?
I
Yeah.
would love to see a point as a result of this arc where the students have to sit down and have a genuine conversation about the idea of death.
Well, not just death, yeah,
But like the fact that if we're going to fight a war, well, what happens in wars? People die, right? And the biggest stopping force for them ever actually getting into a situation where they fight a war, even if the war crops up, is the adults, because you're kids, right? We fight the war so you don't have to. But if the adults fail, right, and then suddenly the kids are put into that situation, what would Mineta say? Oh, there's not really many hot girls to fawn over you here, right? Like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, how much do we really want to do this?
yeah. Are you talking about just death for them, or are you talking about them killing?
Death for them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
See,
them killing, that's a whole other conversation, which I get the feeling MHA will avoid as much as possible.
yeah. What I
But-
was more thinking about is just the idea of they don't even have to be involved in the fight. This is the thing.
Sure.
This is the thing
Yeah.
that I feel like death is too simple. Think about the idea that some of them are just going to agree with the Meta Liberation Army.
Yeah.
Who cares about whether or not, they're
Secret
involved in
agents
the
the whole
fight?
time or-
No. Who cares about whether they're actually involved in the fight? But just the idea of whether they support
Sure.
what Hero Society asks of them to do in response to this. Because this is the part that's weird here, is that we have never met this Meta Liberation Army.
Nope.
We have no actual proof that they even exist.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's weird here, to me personally, is that when you have Hawks being this singular point where I 100% trust him,
Yeah.
and yet you can tell by the type of secret spy James Bond kind of story that they're
not
put
gonna
in
go
there.
well.
No, there's going to be points where not only will it not go well, but where we're going to be trying, the story's going to try to make us not trust him.
Right, like him attacking Best Jeanist.
Yeah, exactly. And yet we have to trust him because he's literally the one in the personal convergence, Venn diagram point of all the things that are going on right now.
Right.
And so I think the real answer is that there's going to be people that are directly connected to him that are not Dabi and Shigaraki and all them, the League of Villains, and we're not going to trust them. Those are the people that I'm really nervous about. It's the handler, the people that are watching and grooming him and making sure that he's their perfect tool.
The fact that he has to give out the message in secret, and not just in secret, but guised as Meta Liberation Army propaganda.
Yeah, what is that shit?
Yeah. Because now while it's totally possible that his direct handler is she's solid maybe, but he's part of an organization. A lot of people are tuning into his data, right? It could just be something where it's I know that there are, just going by law of large numbers, there's at least 30% of the people that I meet on a daily basis are Hydra spies, right? Hail Hydra.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go out and just be passing out these books,
Yeah.
And oh boy, Hawks as a character is the character that I never would have expected MHA to introduce.
Bring up to the forefront.
Right, because as far as okay, we're gonna have an arc and we need a new character for this arc to kind of champion what the conflict's gonna be about, and be that lens into seeing it happen and all of that stuff.
So when we cut literally to just another location, he's our perspective character.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very similar to what Night Eye was in the Airy arc with Overhaul and everything, right? Yeah. That didn't end very well for Night Eye.
Yeah, he very much has that Night Eye kind of vibe for his character, in that he is, if anyone so far that's been introduced is set up to die, I don't think Endeavor could die, but he could.
Endeavor could, but, I don't think Endeavor will.
Yeah, I think it's more likely that it's Hawks because of the emotional story that's being kind of seeded in here with his connection to Endeavor, and also his upbringing, which is very vaguely tragic as far as we can see. Yeah.
Now, last thing I want to mention as far as the whole Phoenix angle thematically for things, one of the reasons that I love Phoenix is the most is because from the ashes they rise, right?
Yeah.
Now, that could be something where for Hawks and Endeavor, if the Phoenix is representing the two of them as the tip of the spear for Hero Society or something, then that's a very hopeful take for them, right?
They'll be reborn out of this conflict, and at the very least, one of them will make a big thing out of this going forward.
And even if they're not, then that at the very least means that Hero Society probably will. And that is very exciting for me, for the world of MHA, to see what kind of world is birthed from the ashes of this one.
Yeah.
How far this one gets broken down, for one.
Right.
Because that's going to be engaging to see.
Yeah, I would definitely see that as being a almost a guaranteed thing. It's just a matter of what does them burning mean.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
evocative, but what are the details?
Right, I would assume specifically with Endeavor, part of his whole thing will be that his a lot of his hero worshippers, if you will, a lot of people that look up to him, will probably eventually come to see, just in general, that he's not necessarily that great of a guy.
And if anything, his mortality is probably what will continue and what has made people follow him in the past.
Yeah, that he's
a guy. But watch me, I'm going to burn.
He's a guy burning for them. Yeah. I agree. Hawks, though, had some interesting interactions. And we're going to kind of rapid fire through a bunch of them here. Interaction with Sliding Go.
Yeah.
The really random little hero guy
Hard to
that
take
bumped
seriously
into
kind of hero, yeah.
bumped into Bakugo and Todoroki. He was talking all hot shit to Hawks, and then another guy in the background's like, no. You're basic.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck
Sit
up.
down.
You know, like,
Yeah.
sit down.
Yeah.
But then they used that as an exposition foreshadowing type tool to say, well, okay.
Micro devices.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but super surveillance.
Yeah.
And the kind of verbs that they use, not the verbiage, but the verbs, like the literal verbs were things like expose and like, like watch, like, things like.
And they were talking about watching all of Heroes. Like
Well, okay. Remember, let's not conflate it because I got this confused too.
Okay.
There was the part where they were talking about what Hawks has access to in general.
right.
But then it was that the devices are to watch Hawks specifically.
Yeah. But the idea that the surveillance doesn't just extend to Hawks, like, because while they of course there's the devices that they install in Hawks, right? The idea that this is something that they have a vested interest in having in the greater hero society, which makes sense because if they are aware that there might be this meta liberation army, right?
You're definitely,
even though they're totally keeping it under wraps to keep chaos from getting out and to keep the other side from knowing how much they know and all that stuff.
Yeah.
They would want information, right? That would be one of the big things that they would want, especially if a war is coming. Wars are won by information. So,
But what you're talking about is the amount of data collecting they're doing on everyone. Right?
exactly, right. And that's pretty terrifying. And if that data gets into the wrong hands, it could easily become a double-edged sword.
Right.
So
and that's, I think, the thing that they are setting up with Hawks is that he's a linchpin for way too many plots, which means that every action he takes is extremely powerful, if that makes sense.
Right.
And that's why I think those guys were like, you need permission before you can go anywhere and stuff.
Even though we know literally everything you do, that's not enough. Also get permission.
Right.
Yeah, that's oh boy.
I am really surprised that Hawks is capable of the mental weight, it seems, that's being placed on him. And
Years of practice.
Yeah, and this is the thing. You were talking about soldiers earlier. If we want to talk about anyone who is a soldier right now, it's
Hawks.
literally Hawks. He is literally the
Child
soldier built up from the beginning to be this perfect tool.
And he's doing a great job of it.
And they have control over him, probably because he believes in what he's doing. And this is the part that I feel like is subtly being built up here. I think Hawks is meant to be a dark, foreboding message of what Hero Society wants the kids to become.
Ooh, now I'm thinking of like Vikings Blood Eagle.
Well, okay. So
run
with me on the
analogies and stuff,
run with me on the meta stuff here, pun intended, with the meta liberation army.
Yeah.
Is that they were just talking about, wow, he's only 6 years older than us, but he's thinking about things so much different.
Oh yeah. Bakugo being all like, I think I was almost faster than you, or I think I was actually a bit faster than you. And I can just imagine in Hawk's head, he's like, sure, Bakugo, whatever you say, you might have been. You
you weren't faster than my feathers, though. That you didn't see.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, even if you are, cool. That's all you have to worry about
That's
right
all
now.
you have to think
Are you
about.
faster than me? The things that are going on in my head and that I have to deal with are way beyond that, and I hope for your sake that you never have to. Think about that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Never even know that side of the universe exists.
And yet, by the nature of how the story is bringing these three into the conflict, and
they're going to get involved in it,
right? But they
tangled
also have very different viewpoints on this whole type of situation. Deku is the kind of one who is literally the bearer of All Might's like past and everything, and yet he brings this new kind of perspective to
all of that,
to everything here. Bakugo is the one that is in some ways very like, nah, don't screw this. I'm going to go and build me. I'm going to make everyone watch me.
I liked that they finally made that connection, like literally, because I don't think they've ever like explicitly stated it. Of the you're a lot like Endeavor. You know, yes, he is.
We mentioned this back in season 2,
right?
Where we were like, you know what? In a lot of ways, Endeavor looking at All Might and kind of chasing after him is literally what Bakugo's doing. As he kind of looks at Deku and chases after him, but also keeps making the big deal.
I'm
of
going
how
to stay ahead of
I'm
you.
going to
you
be
know,
ahead of you.
I'm better than you.
You're
yeah.
following me, actually.
Right.
You know?
That kind of crazy competitiveness that he brought into the tournament, where it's that I'm going to win, I'm going to be number one, all that stuff. That's the kind of stuff that you would expect, and maybe even we had seen in Endeavor.
Yep.
But
so now,
yeah.
given that this seems to be something where they're bringing up, well, the kids into this conflict in a way that's forced, also, and that was an awkward point for the adults in the previous episode of being like, I don't like that we're being forced to do this in a way that it doesn't feel safe to do that right now.
Yeah. Well, and yet it's the whole thing of if they know that there's an army of 100,000 on its way, sorry, we're going to have to militia these kids.
Right, but that's so messed up.
Oh yeah,
because then they're not being honest about the reason why they're doing the work studies. And yet it's very clear now, right? Because we have the third person omniscient perspective.
We are secretly prepping them for this thing that, to be fair, the kids already signed up. They wanted to do this, right? They no compulsion or anything. They wanted to become professional heroes, right?
Right, but is this what hero's job is? Is this? This is not necessarily something that goes under the code of being a hero. Is fight uprising anarchy force?
I would say in this society it is, and it always has been.
Oh, that's dark. Yeah,
and that's been the point of why are the villains called villains, right? Because they have quirks that don't fit in well into society, and they don't have a voice to be heard.
Yeah,
and as a result of that, they resort to crazy actions and things like that. That's what Stain was pointing out.
If you give freedom to the limited few, then the negative consequences go to the others who don't have that kind of freedom.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, your quirk? No, you can't use that. That one's dangerous. It's like,
you can be a threat to the people around you and stuff. It's just better if you don't.
Yeah.
Different questions that this arc could really bring up, and if it gets into the whole thing of where a bunch of the different classes or class 1A is like split over what to do, and who do they really like, and all that stuff. Hey, that I would say is a much more relevant in our day and age kind of discussion to bring up of the divide that can come because of differing beliefs and tribalism and stuff than heroes versus villains, black and white and
which
stuff.
Which is already a very simplistic form of tribalism.
Right, exactly. It was just something that, maybe helped us survive, world wars and things.
Well, it was literally the thing that helped them survive All for One.
Yes.
That's how they beat him, basically. I think essentially there was a rise of heroes that just literally fought the villains.
Spearheaded by, basically the one for all users.
They kind of made the big kind of momentary flashes of change at the very least.
Those catalysts to make it be able to happen.
Right, but I love the idea that this book, though, is old. This is something that is a cycle that comes back, maybe.
Yeah.
And in terms of how we look at kind of grandiose societal change on a macro level for the globe, there's definitely moments where you can tell the psychological and societal pressure on not just the individual, but on the different groups, through that make a society and what have you. The tension and the pressure gets too tight, too much, and some kind of release is coming. And it's just the question of how violent of a change will it bring.
Yeah.
And some of that is really, really scary for those that are I'm not necessarily feeling that, or I'm not necessarily on board with any side here. But when things get to that point, when it's there's 100,000.
Yeah.
That's not a movement anymore, and it's not even really an army anymore. That's a small nation. If they have communication, if they have all the means of which to be essentially anonymous, where they don't need to kind of wave a flag or whatever or something like that. That's basically enough to change all of Japan.
Here's another way of thinking about it. Anytime you have an army, they are the vocal minority. That's a fun way of looking at it.
Oh, sure.
And for every person that actually fights, right, that calls himself part of that army, there's going to be, I would say, 10 at least.
Oh, at least.
At very least. Probably more like 100.
Probably more like
right?
100.
That don't.
Yeah.
So, this army of 100,000, yeah, no, this is
it's effectively
a much
bigger.
much bigger deal.
Yeah. And also the number 100,000 is irrelevant, really, because in a month it could be 200,000.
Well,
in 4 months it could be 1 million. We don't know.
If you go into a war and say kill 20,000 of those 100,000, then suddenly their families have a much better reason to join the army.
Yeah, or even can you
Sure.
justify killing any of them?
Oh, totally. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation that they probably. If MHA goes into that territory, oh my God, I am going to be curious to see how they handle it. Right?
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, I don't think they'll go into that at all. I think if anything, we need to set our expectations back a little bit, because I think there's a possibility that this Meta Liberation Army never sees the light of day.
That's true. We don't actually. One of the things that
we've never seen it. We don't know.
We've never
what
seen
it
it,
actually
and
is.
and to compare it to the Overhaul arc, Overhaul was a figure that basically
He was in the Mafia.
Well, right. He was in the Mafia, but basically that was a figurehead for another organization to be brought into the conflict.
Sure.
A much smaller organization than the Meta Liberation Army, but the League of Villains and the Meta Liberation Army, two very different things, right? It's more like the League of Villains is like trying to get them on board or something. Now, if we secretly make it so that like All for One was secretly the one who started this whole Meta Liberation Army thing or something like that, then that would be a way to have a figurehead that we already know. But
well, we know it's someone named Destro who was the original like propagator of this ideology,
of this book. But I'm assuming they're dead now, or or something like that. But
yeah, probably.
But barring that, how do we actually face them if it's just an army of 100,000 people with no obvious leader, right? Yeah. Because we can't just have, oh yeah, you fight people from the Meta Liberation Army. Well, that never ends because there's 100,000 of them.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you resolve that conflict?
Right. You have to literally have them almost win.
Right.
And then build the heroes back up, taking their feedback actually in mind. That's literally the only way this
almost like
go.
Setting up champions from each side to not necessarily fight, even though it might resolve that way, but to champion the conflict and the ideologies and the beliefs and the thoughts of the other side, so that way, if one of them gets defeated by being like convinced this is hyper dramatized and idealized and all that stuff, then maybe it can resolve the conflict with the sides as a whole, because then it's our concerns were brought to bear or something like that, and we got some of what we wanted, or something like that, and then maybe you could get a happy ending. But this is very serious stuff that they're going to get into. So
yeah, and we've structurally isolated the arc's main conflict down to these three boys as being kind of the main characters of it.
Yep.
And the OP kind of really emphasizes that.
Yes.
In that a lot of the other characters are fading into the gray in the background, or they were in the gray in the background. They might need to be brought up into the light, and they're led maybe by these three with Hawks and Endeavor even at the front of them.
Yeah.
But there's stuff going on with like a whole bunch of things that Hawks has got his hands in all these pies here, to where things can move quickly.
Yes.
And while we're going to have a whole half of a season still to get through here, I shudder to think that what can happen in just a few episodes, given that we're not probably getting the Meta Liberation Front's like full like rising in this season. Because at 4 months, like you were saying, if we do the whole 1 week an episode,
and granted,
that still comes later.
That was a silly thing, because I know that these episodes in general don't cover a week or anything like that, right? But it's a thing of the that's
it's a joke that we like to use.
Right. It's probably all going to go to shit about at the end of the season, and that would make sense, because that would be one hell of a finale.
Right. But oh my God, this has nothing to do necessarily with Shigaraki. The whole thing that happened in the Deka thing.
Well, that was him, though.
That was him doing that. But he destroyed the place.
Yeah, I think it
the protesters might have been the Meta Liberation Army. But what if, crazy theory here, what if Shigaraki used the incident as a way to draw the ire of the Liberation Army to make them actually like feel like they're being like, suppressed by something.
Sure, yeah. That I could see that happening as a way to galvanize them a bit more. The other thing I could see happening is that he has the League of Villains join the Meta Liberation Army. oh yeah, our goals are the same, and then they sort of go into their midst and in their ranks and everything, and then just help rile them up. They be aggravators and provocateurs and such.
Yeah.
And then Shigaraki goes and is like, yeah, rile them up. We're gonna go do this thing. Boom! I destroy this whole area of city. Yeah, we're doing great. This is awesome. Let's keep going.
Yeah,
and
but
then,
it looked like no one else was alive, dude. I think he just killed all of them, basically. Like,
I don't know.
They said there was like...
I'd want to go back and check, because I feel like...
There was no one else there. I can tell you that when they showed the city, probably everyone had left at that point.
Right.
Because of destruction,
But
right?
they mentioned there were like 20 protesters or
yes,
something.
but they didn't mention them necessarily being there when, like, afterwards.
Sure.
They just mentioned that there were people at
But they
the
also didn't
incident
mention
and then
them
a thing
dying.
happened.
Like-
no, of course not. No, that's not necessarily. But yeah, I'm just bringing up the point that he leveled a city, you know?
Or a section of a city.
A portion of a city.
Right.
Which
Several
is,
blocks.
Yeah, which is not I avoided hitting people kind of thing. Because they mentioned in the TV thing that All for One's thing specifically did have, I believe they mentioned that his did have deaths like involved in it, the Kamino Award that got.
Yeah, I can't remember. Like
that was sudden. That was without warning.
They made a big deal about it, and it was either because a bunch of people died or because of All Might's heroic efforts, somehow they managed to keep anyone from dying or something like that. But yeah, I can't remember
something like that. But
yeah.
Okay, y'all, this is a great start to an episode. We didn't even talk really about the OP needy, but I love the stuff focused on Endeavor and Hawks.
Yep,
that was really cool. I loved the like little kid Hawk stuff in ED with the glass,
awesome.
and then the fire, like burning it all away. I already mentioned the reaction to the glass guy, so I'm not really going to spend much time in the discussion.
The OP is also just a bop.
The OP,
it's great. Like as far as
that's one of my new favorite OPs.
Yeah, like because MHA has kind of a tough road since it's getting to that point where it's going on for a long time. Where with all these new OPs that you get, how do you make sure that they all feel like distinct and unique and all of that stuff, and don't just sort of fade into the background of your memory?
That's totally
right?
the case for some of them.
Right, it's totally the case for some of them, and that's not the fault of those OPs, right? No. They do their job, they do it well, and and things like that, right? But how do you rise above, plus ultra, all that stuff? Not every OP can have All Might screaming with stars in his eyes, right?
Or be the second season's, what is it, the first to the second season's OP? There was this one OP in the second season that's just still, I think it's pretty much my favorite.
Right, but this is this very quickly made a very strong positive impression on me, shall we say.
It was quite good.
Yeah.
And visuals as well. So, y'all, thank you so much for watching this episode's reaction and discussion. If you want to see the full-length timer version of the reaction, go check out the link in the description below. For our Patreon, you can get an any level support there gets you access to our Discord, where you can chat with us and the community there about MHA as a show. There's stuff for you MHA manga people in there, or just about anime in general. And also be sure to check out our Twitch channel.
We stream every weekday. The info's in the description.
Yeah, so if any of that interests you, we'll see you there. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all
next time.